wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Your Body a Temple? Is it, Bridget?
I like to think so.
It's late at night. We've gotten a bit delirious. Before we jump into the podcast, I'd love to stop it. I'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au if you can understand me and sign up to join our tribe. On the front page, we just got a little box, which also I want to remind you, if you're on an iPhone or a phone of any sort, you need to turn your phone sideways so it's horizontal, and then the form will pop up, because if you just leave it vertical, you can't actually see the pop-up form. It's a bit of an unfortunate glitch that's on the website coding that we can't change. So nourishingmother.com.au, sign up to join our tribe, because once a week, assuming we're not too tired to get to the newsletter, we will be sending you a newsletter.
Yes.
I was just thinking, because we're not too tired. Yes, depending on our children and how they sleep.
Good old sleep.
Where we send you all the links and tips and blurbs and everything we've put out in the world, and you can pick and choose. We'd love to dive deeper. Yes. So please jump on, join our tribe and spend some time communicating with us.
No, I didn't mean for my response then to sound so lewd, because that's not where we're taking this. Well, I obviously did, but you know. That's not where we're intending to take the podcast today, though, is it?
Well, who knows? Is your body a temple? I feel like it's this phrase is that's why we chose it, is because it's hashed around so much now. Yeah. Like, you know, I even, joke around with my in-laws about it. You know, we have these beautiful friends and family friends, and they're quite kind of, love a drink and love and eat and, all of this. And, it'll be because they can't have the 100th piece of chocolate. No, I can't. My body is a temple. Or, I just think it becomes quite ironic, I suppose, this statement. And I want to talk about, I suppose, the irony, but I also want to talk about the basic biology and chemistry and physiology and how our mental life actually plays a huge role in that, and how epigenetics play a role, which I know you're really interested in as well, Bridget, so I'd love to hear about that. So we kind of just want to hash it out with you with all of that. And we just kind of started here because we were we've put together the Winter Wellness Guide, which has, people have been buying online, and we just thought there's something here about just having the conversation around wellness again, and what the conscious component to that is as we lead into winter.
Yeah, and I think in the context of the environment in which we live in, and the media talk a lot about winter and the flu and things to watch out for and protect yourself and all of that, and how that then can sometimes create a sense of fear and a sense of sometimes disconnection with our bodies. Because it can feel like there's something that's preying upon us outside of us that we have no agency in protecting ourselves against, or that we distrust our bodies on some level, or that perhaps our bodies can become for some a form of punishment for ourselves. When you see people punishing themselves in the gym, or trying to change, correct, shift, let go of some part of themselves, and the body becomes the vessel for the disconnection. I think that health and our relationship with our bodies is such a massive, big multi-layered thing, but so much of it really depends on our view of our bodies and ourselves in the world, and how much agency and we have over our health, and are we striving for a one-sided world, and what is our attitude to things like disease, and what is our attitude to illness, and can we find the benefits in those things, and can we see how our body is working for us all of the time and trying to communicate to us, and on some level loves us and wants us to feel and live an aligned life, and how we then work with our body to live our lives and live the lives we want, not to live a kind of a disconnected life from, the body that we've been beautifully given, the skin we're in.
So you've said this before, that we have the body that is perfect for us in this lifetime. What do you mean by that?
So there's no mistakes that we have been given, the bodies that we've been given, with the perhaps talents, with the foibles, with the challenges that we have on some level, because it allows us to have mastery in a particular area of life. So perhaps if we feel like we don't, we might feel like we're lacking in some area physically, which might have been the source of teasing when we were young. Well, where did that get us to put our attention then? So if we couldn't expand our life through perhaps the way that we thought our body should be, where did we choose our expansion? Where did we choose to put our genius? If we couldn't use our body for attracting attention, how did that allow us to develop our mind, for example? That's what I'm leaning at there, where I say we get the perfect body for our purpose, because it's, if you think about infinite intelligence and the way that that manifests in the moment of conception, everything is coded there, and so much of who we become is manifested in that moment of conception, and the moment of birth, when worlds collide and the soul comes in and the purpose is laid out on some level. I don't think that we can ever really grasp the depth and breadth of what it means to be in the bodies that we have, and to learn the lessons that our bodies are seeking to reveal to us. But it's something to be, I think, bowed at, like our body is a temple, with wisdom to be understood and explored and revered. But I'm certainly clear that all of this can sound so great when you're, feeling a deep connection with your body and feeling good in your body.
Or when you're healthy.
And when you're healthy. Yeah. But what about those times when you're really not? When you're perhaps struggling with an illness, or you feel like you're hating on part of yourself, and what's that then there for? Because, I think back to, particularly for me, probably being a teenager was the hardest time I ever experienced. I had incredibly terrible acne for probably about 6 years, to the point where, it was everything but Roaccutane, which is a pretty intense prescriptive drug. And I can really appreciate, as painful as that was as a teenager, and as much as I hated myself in so many ways then, I can see how much that my skin was me. It was talking to me. It was the anger and the eruptions and the pain was all trying to get me to learn to love myself. It was all trying to get me to appreciate myself and to feel, the depths of the pain that teenagehood can take you to, and not try to disconnect from that. And I can see how it was also an opportunity for my mother to have to relive her pain through me, and how then I could use the building blocks of experiencing, Western doctors who didn't really ever give me a toolkit to go into my psyche or my emotional and mental health, and that feeling of lack there gave me such an enormous amount of drive to understand how our bodies are seeking to talk to us, to understand who we are in the world and our place in the world, and how, the essence of human behavior, essentially, and health far beyond the physical. And so those gaping wounds that, that I felt then, and that I got to experience through feeling so awkwardly ugly as a teenager, was so empowering at the same time. And when I look back at it now, and when I, look at how, as a result of the only way back then that I could control it, not having a toolkit to work through mental emotional stuff, was to go on the pill for 10 years and further disconnect myself from my body, and further disconnect myself from my cycle. And, if I didn't have the void of that, I would not have the value now that I have on, much deeper body connection, and really understanding the gifts of our cycles, and wanting to create that for other women and for my daughter. If I didn't have that void, I couldn't have what I have now.
No, nor would you have gone on the path of consciousness that you have, because there wouldn't have been a reason.
There wouldn't have been a reason to.
Yeah.
And so, just like, we might have perhaps a strong value, many of our listeners do, on natural health. And I really have just as much appreciation, though it's not my, first choice. I really have a great appreciation for, traditional Western medicine, conventional Western medicine, and that very medical model, because we all need it, at various points in our life, and it can be the answer. And sometimes for some of us, it can be the answer because it brings us back to calling into the essence of who we are, and getting us to wake up to what we yearn for more deeply. So just like I think that the body's working for homeostasis, and it's always trying to find that perfect balance between health and disease, I think so is our broader healthcare model, trying to find that balance between, health is from within and nurtured, and is our responsibility for wildlife management of our health through, looking at the gut, versus, the quick fix outside of you, and those things both being acceptable and okay, and for us as individuals to see them for what they are and make conscious choices about what path is right for us and where we want to go.
Because within Suburban Soundcastles, you screen a lot of movies that have to do with health. Why is it really important for you to have a conversation around health and consciousness?
Because I think that there's an enormous amount of, there's a huge industrialization, or industrial complex around healthcare, and on both sides, I think. And the void of health for so many is so big. Like, if we don't have our health, what do we have? And so I think it's a topic that resonates with so many people, and the choices that we get to make in our healthcare can be so vast and are shaped by so much of the media we might consume, or the beliefs that we've grown up with. And often we need like a pattern interrupt in the form of the events that we create to, come together and perhaps challenge the paradigms in which we accept as truth and see another side. And so often what we do is really challenge what I see as the status quo, which might be, the very conventional Western approach to health, which does tend to look at diseases or illnesses as sort of outside or predatory things that we need to eradicate against, and make sure that we're that kind of germaphobe thing, as opposed to looking at the microbiome and supporting the microbiome as much as we can through nutrition and psychology and environment and all of those things.
So it's flipping it from what Bridget's referring to is flipping it from germ theory, which is the germ is the reason we're sick.
Yeah. When
the germ enters the body, the germ does this, and therefore the body responds this way, versus, well, you could have that same germ in 10 different people, and 10 different people would either express it or not express it, or express it differently. Exactly. So in essence, health or disease comes down to the organism's health and overall health and well-being being the combination of spiritual or consciousness, whatever you want to call it, emotional, mental and physical alignments. So depending on what's going on there will depend on how that germ is metabolized within that body, and therefore what the effects are on the other side of it. Sorry, I just interrupted you.
No, I love that you gave that definition that I couldn't quite get to, because that's what I mean. Yes.
Which is fascinating, because that's what natural medicine is built upon, is the idea that that's why we don't need to label diseases. It's why we don't need to have labels on them, because we're never treating the disease, we're treating the person. And the person has imbalances, not the disease. So you're working to support the person to metabolize or move through the disease in the appropriate way. Because the only reason the disease itself has taken hold is because that organism is out of balance, that human is out of balance. So if you put the human back into balance, it will naturally be able to ward off and fight the disease, regardless of the exposure, theoretically. Of course, then you bring in, which I'm fascinated by, which I know you are too. I mean, even in what was that movie that you screened where it was the cancer patients? Oh, what was that movie?
Oh, is it Heal?
Oh, was it Heal? Yeah, I think it was Heal. And they were talking on there about having chemotherapy, and there was, I think it was a couple of people, but one in particular, who was saying we had to transform the perception of the chemotherapy entering the body as from toxic to being, in my mind, like these healing scavengers that were coming in and were doing good for my body. And I wonder, in and of itself, without even changing the chemotherapy, which in and of itself we know is toxic and killing of cells, that by virtue of mentally and consciously changing it as it enters our body, it changes. So we're vibrational first. We're subtle bodies before we're manifesting in physical bodies. So I just find even that a fascinating conversation.
And that the power of perception, which gets so often left out of any conversation around health, because this is the reality, right? Like some people will see, oh my, thank goodness I've got the opportunity to access chemo and that's going to help me and that's going to heal me. And that belief can be enormously powerful and you know, perhaps influence that patient's ability to heal versus the person who's feeling terribly apprehensive about it and not sure and feeling like it's going to poison them. And, you know, as you're saying, that can really influence how that's then taken on by the body and whether that's seen as healing or hurting.
Which is also where you and I take the conversation. So we love physical health. We love natural health. We love having the consciousness and the knowledge to be able to make choices for healthcare. That's incredibly important. And that, as you say, Bridget, and as you do in your work, is to be able to challenge the status quo so that we don't ever want to get to the point where a government dictates and we have no choice and we have no say. I mean, that's a really scary place to be. I mean, as you and I talked about earlier, I mean, that's how we look back and we go, how was it that Hitler did what he did in this world? And it was the way that the government was run and everybody went with it. And we place that same perception on healthcare systems and it becomes a little scary. So it's always really important to have a really conscious conversation around it. And we love entering the body on a physical level and honouring our temple with things that feel good and help us feel good as we're eating them and afterwards. But what we don't want to leave out of this conversation is the conscious aspect, which within the wellness guide, within the areas of the body, we gave some conscious questions to start asking in terms of starting to dig up what's happening for me that this area of the body is representative of, and how does this disease or illness help me in achieving who I am or where I'm headed in this world? How does it help me have connection with my child? How does it, you know, I just think there's so many conversations around just the beliefs that we have and how they influence, therefore, our physical body's ability to turn on or off, even the epigenetic component of how we physically change. We know that we can do beliefs and have a vibrational change in our biochemistry. We know that one influences the other. Our psychology influences our physiology. So it's just a really interesting conversation to have around how much are we spending thinking about I need to stay away from the person that's got gastro versus I would only get gastro if I needed it. And why do I need it? And I've said to you,
and which I must say is incredibly empowering.
It's empowering. Sometimes I feel scared by it. I have to say, 'cause sometimes the enormity of that feels so big. I'm like, why? You know, and I said to you, my third child has gotten gastro every single time I've needed to build a course or a web page for us. Every single time.
There is no accidents there.
There's no accidents because she's flat out with a fever and super sick, and so I just set up a little mini bed in the lounge room and we have the TV on and we have the, you know, this beauty.
And you have like guilt-free TV time for her.
Yeah, guilt-free TV time for her, and I work non-stop while the other kids are out of the house. It's serving me pretty well.
Yeah.
Even though it's in the form of illness, and I would rather she wasn't sick because it limits us in so many other ways in our world, it's still serving me. And how's it serving her? Well, it brings my attention into her. She gets lots of extra attention and care and special foods and broths made.
What a way to get love.
Yeah, right. So it's just starting to stretch that conversation around what health actually is and how we have the capacity to influence even our physical body regardless of what's going in. It's even the conversation we have around food has an energetic body to it. So you could have the most incredible, nutritious, you know, all vegan, all raw, macrobiotic plate of food in front of you, or you could have a Macca's burger. But depending on how you feel and what attachments and beliefs you have to each of those foods, how you're feeling at the time of consumption, how you were feeling at the time of preparation.
Who you're sharing the meal with, if you're sharing it with somebody, how you're feeling about that relationship with that person.
Yeah, will completely change the way in which that is digested, manifested within our body.
It's profound, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think that's a conversation we have enough. And even as a naturopath, I remember being in university and having a couple of what I thought were just like woo-woo kind of teachers speaking about the, you know, because we talk about the spiritual, mental and physical triad of health and wellness in holistic healthcare practices. But I always used to think a bit like, oh yeah, all right, so you're praying or manifesting or doing some yoga. Yeah, righto. Spiritual. Tick.
Yeah.
And I used to have some practitioners in college talking about this, and I was like, what? Like, just eat better, like, or whatever.
Yeah.
And now I just so get it. What I didn't get back then, because I was so entering the body on a physical level, which is totally great. But there's going to come a time at which just doing the physical thing stops working. And it's just calling you into what's happening there.
And also I think sometimes the physical thing can be so about control. Like I know that when I was trying to get my fertility back to have Sylvie, I was probably the strictest I'd ever been on food. You know, so I got rid of gluten, I got rid of all refined sugar.
Yeah, I remember that.
I really stripped it back. And I got self-righteous. I got controlling about my food. I was judgmental of where I went and whether the food would be okay for me. And that,
God, I remember doing that too.
That didn't serve me that well, you know? And
or did it? Like sometimes I think I got a bit of a feeling of being special and superior.
Totally. I did all that. Right?
It's still a benefit, right?
Did all that. But it didn't get me the baby.
No.
And it wasn't until I backed off and, you know, let go of the need to control it. Because I can totally see it can just be one more addiction, right? The desire to control food and the desire to count how, you know, clean your food is. Like look at how natural your food is.
Food is a really interesting one, isn't it, in terms of power dynamics?
Yeah. And even with our children, because, you know, my son definitely pushes that button for me in terms of wanting sweet things all the time. And I definitely control his food. I know I do. And I really have to feel into those edges because I know, because the same thing happened to me, the more I try to control him in his early childhood, the more that is going to be flipped later, like I did. Like, you know, I just went nuts when I was 12 and could go to the canteen and buy whatever I wanted. Yeah. Because I wanted all the things I could never had. You know, I wanted all the things I could that Mum would never ever in a million years buy or stock in the pantry. Yeah. So it's really, for me, like a journey of, you know, putting in as much goodness as I can physically and then looking at health really holistically to allow emotions to have their full expression, to cuddle a lot, to look at healing through touch, all of those things, like that multi-layered health spectrum. And then also giving him choice and allowing him to feel what it feels like to eat way too many sweets or to eat the food that I wouldn't really choose for him. And like, you know, we went through, like, of all places, we went through McDonald's drive-through and we were out in the country once. And like I had to get okay with him eating chicken nuggets.
I get that.
You know, and like go, it's going to be okay. I had to tell myself, you know. And that's the thing, right? Like it's so many of our perceptions that we bring to food like shape how food is. You know, because if I had a real judgment on that, I would almost look for evidence of him being sick from that Macca's. It was the McDonald's that made you run down. You know, like we can do that. And so I think bringing the consciousness is just as much about what the judgments are that we're putting into perhaps why our kids are sick or why we're struggling with something or why this is symptoms arising, you know?
I really do. I really also, as you were speaking then, was just thinking, yeah, it's so important that we maintain, as opposed to making the control of our body vicarious through the control of food, is coming back into that sense of my body has an innate wisdom.
Yeah.
and we can override that wisdom with our head. And I think there's almost no greater example of this than pregnant women and cravings. Have you ever noticed that? And all of a sudden that body, you know, expands spiritually as much as it does physically. And the things that you used to be able to control, all of a sudden you have zero control over, right? This is, you know, you become much more animalistic in your body's drivers. And I always find it fascinating to see what happens with women when that happens, and how their food consumption changes. And yet it is probably the only time in their life that a lot of these women will allow themselves to fully feel and to fully follow their sensuous nature.
Because they have an excuse to.
Yeah, because it's socially acceptable to listen to your body. Because there's still a reverence for the life that you're creating. Now, don't forget that we're an alive being recreating every day of every year. But because we're creating a new life in the form of a new human, we still maintain the reverence for that. And so we make it okay. But I think this is a really important conversation to have, is maintaining that connection to our body. We don't move the way that we used to. We don't allow our body to express itself the way that a child can express how they're feeling through their very physicality. We have stopped our drive for pleasure, for listening to those breadcrumbs that open up our heart and open up our body and open up our senses. And it doesn't make sense why we want that thing. So we shouldn't have that thing. And all these reasons that we remove pleasure from our lives because we see it as frivolous, that it's purposeless, that in this linear patriarchal world, you know, the pleasures of the flesh have been eradicated. And I find it fascinating to witness that shifting of polarity in pregnancy. I know I'm going around in circles, but I just find like this is a really important conversation to have with our children, as much it is to have with ourselves, is coming back to your body has an innate wisdom when you allow it to speak to you. And either it's going to speak to you in whispers about what it needs and desires in a day. And it might not be that you need a strawberry milkshake, but it might be, oh, I'm needing a bit more sweetness in my life, or I'm needing some really good fats to nurture and nourish my body that is shifting and changing and transitioning right now, or to support the hormones, or to support the menstrual bleed that I'm going through, or this huge physical demand that I'm putting my body under. You know, it might be, you know, I'm feeling really low on energy. I need some vitamin D, but the only food that my body can connect to that might come in a different form. So sometimes there can be a bit of decoding of the wisdom. But I just think the purpose of tuning in is to really check, like even when we're standing there with the fridge door open, is, am I really hungry right now? Or do I want something else? And what is that thing that I'm really seeking? What is that void I'm seeking to fill?
I think that, you know, emotional eating, which is what you're leaning towards here, is probably one of the most fundamental patterns that all of us have, because so often when needs weren't met for us as young children, you know, we look to fulfill that, or either fulfill a need or numb a pain or seek a pleasure through food. And they can become such deep patterns for us, which we wonderfully get to see with our own children.
Well, we have such strong attachments, memory attachments to food, don't we? Like, how much can you smell something and instantly you are transported back to that memory, that time, that place, that age? Like, if food is powerful because it is sensual, and our sensual nature connects us to our physical body and the memories that are stored there. Our body remembers what our mind forgets or distorts.
Yeah, it's so true.
And food is another pathway in there, no different to movement or massage or any body therapy. Food in and of itself is a body therapy, and so is health and disease.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. I mean, even talking about disease as a therapy, I mean, you know, it's been shown that some illnesses in childhood are quite galvanizing for the immune system, and they help, you know, like kind of go through the body and kill off other cells that, you know, might be problematic down the track. So, you know, having the respect for that is important.
Yeah, and I think also just starting to reframe when our children are sick that in some way we've failed. I just think, you know, there's genius in being sick, in that it meets needs, like slowing down. It teaches you to be grateful for that thing that you just took for granted. Like my son even just recently, he pulled the door over the top of his foot and we thought he'd fractured his toe. Like it swelled up and went black. And he could hardly walk because of this one tiny little toe. And I just thought, this is amazing, right? Because you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Yeah.
And here's this one little toe you've never thought about ever, given not even a wink to. And all of a sudden this one little toe has affected your entire life. And I think that's amazing. I also love the fact that it was in his foot, because as a presence and a mindfulness practice, I love the idea of sweeping through our body when your mind's going too crazy. To focus on the sensations in your feet means that your whole consciousness is swept from the crown of your head down through your whole body to the bottom of your toes. And I think that is in and of itself genius. So I often think these things with the feet are often, you know, I mean, ankles and knees can be a fear of stepping forwards, but there's something about the very extremity of the body that says to me, sweep back in here, you know, and
It's very ground. It calls you to really ground.
Really, and just to be so grateful. And now he, you know, he thinks about his toe now and he looks at his feet and he's grateful for his feet and what they give him and provide him. And I just think these are the conversations we need to have, where it's still working for us, even when it is painful in our life. It's waking us up to how to make our life moving forwards more easeful, I think. Yeah.
I know. I was thinking about when you were saying that you know, I'd been learning a bit more about, you know, health and disease and you know, a lot of disease comes on board when our immune system is depressed, and often our immune system becomes depressed when we're feeling on some level threatened, or we're trying to ask ourselves to live outside our values. Like our mind is really influencing our immune system and our perceptions. And so I was like, yeah, I've got this nailed. And then I ended up picking up some like gastro bug. And so I'm vomiting and like, what's, and it's like in between vomiting, I was like, what's the purpose of this? I know there's a purpose, damn it, but I hate it.
Yeah. It's really cathartic too. Like I think any type of...
It is cleansing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was really trying to flip it.
Purging.
I wasn't blaming the germ that I picked up. I knew that I could only picked up that germ for a purpose.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Gastro's a bad one to get though.
Yeah.
But a purging is also in and of itself really interesting too, isn't it? Is what's intolerable.
What am I trying to purge? Like,
yeah. What are you trying to get up and move and vibrate even through your body? Don't forget in the very animalistic ritual of you know, retching, it's a very primal movement.
It is, isn't it? And there's no grace about it.
There's none. So I just think there's also genius there in the ways that it gets us to move our body.
Oh, and and I was thinking I think I did a post about it actually when it happened, and I was talking about like, you know, gastro, the great leveler. Yeah. Because it is. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, it'll bring you down.
It's so true. So I just think there's so much wisdom in disease, and to think beyond, you know, the surface of what's happening, no matter what paradigm you follow, to think about the beliefs that are sitting there and the organism as the whole that has an innate intelligence that is always guiding you towards wholeness.
I remember reading somewhere because you know, the theory of the microbiome and the fact that we are more the bacteria almost own us more than we own the bacteria. We are more bacteria than we are human, which means that we really are a product of our environment, and that those cells are completely regenerating every 7 years. So we become a new human in terms of ourselves every 7 years.
Pretty amazing.
But yet it's the emotional charges that govern the expressions of the body. So that's why, you know, so much of our perceptions colour what manifests physically. And why that mind stuff is so profound in terms of how it shapes the body that we have. It's really fascinating.
It is really fascinating. So is your body a temple? Yes, your body is a temple, and any disease is seeking, or dis-ease is seeking to bring you back into alignment with the sovereignty of that temple, with the wisdom that exists within that temple. And same for health. Even being in health is a way of still working for you and getting you to wake up to what's happening around you.
And in your body, like when you're feeling most vital in your body, pay attention to that, because that's your body saying to you, yeah, like you're aligned, like this is good for you, like you keep doing more of this because we feel good here. You know, like when you're, you know, you previously were, it was 10 o'clock at night and you were tired, and then you start reading something and it's like at 7 a.m. in the morning and you're inspired. That's because your body is saying, oh, this is important to you. Like I'm going to give you energy now because I know that there's wisdom here for you. You know, so our bodies love us, you know, and that paying attention to that vitality too is really important.
So when we're thinking about our winter wellness guide, I mean, I put in there videos that go for about an hour and a half in 3 different segments where I went through different systems
and they
of the
are
body.
so freaking good.
Oh, God, I'm so glad you said that, because as I'm doing it, I'm going, am I speaking to practitioners? Am I speaking to parents? Am I speaking to practitioners who are parents? I don't know who I'm speaking to.
They're really good, because I don't know if anybody saw on social media, but I was watching them the other day and Sylvie was walking around pointing at it going, Joey.
So cute.
So, yeah, definitely check it out if you're wanting to kind of look at health and wellness and prepare for winter on both a physical and an emotional level.
Yeah. Particularly with our kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, you and I are all about getting practical with family life too. Like it's one thing to think health has to be this one particular way, and it's another thing to think you can make health whatever you want it to be. And you can definitely start to look at supplements and a health kit and basic family stuff that can work for everybody within that, rather than it needing to be this big ordeal.
I think definitely leading into winter too, you know, that point on supplementation. I mean, supplementation with our diet is already important because of how much our diet today lacks so many good minerals.
Yeah.
So,
and we don't eat seasonally, so we're not eating at optimum peaks, and you know, we're peeling lots of things, so we're losing the greatest amount of nutrients is actually the skin of our fruits and vegetables, which we largely don't eat. We're not eating organ meats anymore. Our dairy is pasteurized and homogenized, so we're missing out on so many of the fat soluble vitamins. The cows potentially aren't even grass and pasture fed, which you know, so there's so many different things in our chain of
food systems.
Yeah, that are dysfunctional. That does mean sometimes we need to supplement. Largely, I would like to think that supplementation comes after you've tried diet corrections, but sometimes supplementation is necessary.
It's not like, you know, just eat a standard diet with minimal vegetables and just have a few pills. Like,
no, because I want you to remember too that pills are manufactured.
Yeah.
Largely.
And they have to be heated to a certain temperature.
But they're not even coming from a natural source. These, I mean, they're completely manufactured. They're synthetic. They're completely manufactured, unless you're getting a whole food crushed powder extract of some sort, which generally is going to have far less of the nutrient that you need, because it's far harder to get a higher concentration when you're not specifically isolating one particular molecule. And they're going to be more expensive. So generally, the products that we're going to be getting are synthetic. So how much do you want synthetic nutrients whizzing around your body? You really want to make sure you've done what you can with diet, and they're the cream on the cake that get you back to optimum health rather than baseline. Sorry, I digress.
No, I love it. So if you want more of that wisdom, get the Winter Wellness Guide.
Or just join the conversation with us just on health consciousness. And I'd love you to really click in with Bridget at Suburban Sandcastles, because she does screen the most incredible movies. And I know that you take that really seriously in terms of what movies you align yourself with and what movies you will share with your audience, and that they've come to trust that as well. And I really respect that, because I see how hard you work in trying to find the right movies as
thank
well.
you.
I really see that. And I've come to so many and I love them. And the health ones are always fascinating. I'm fascinated.
I think it can be just it's just whatever camp you're in. I mean, even amongst like the wellness, natural health community, there's so many opinions, you know, like particularly on diet alone, you know, the definition of right and wrong. I mean, they're all there, right?
Yeah.
But I think all of that stuff asks us to come back into self and ask the questions of the body and tune in.
Yeah, I agree. Come back to the body. Come back to the body. There is such wisdom there. But it can be really hard being there.
Yeah.
So, and really hard listening. And that's what we hope that we kind of fill a gap for.
Yes.
So come join us in our drive. nourishthemother.com.au. In the meantime, Bridget, how can we connect with you and find out about your movies?
So go to suburbansandcastles.com and to connect with you, Jules, the Pleasure Nutritionist, and all your great resources.
Yeah, thank you, thepleasurenutritionist.com. But the Winter Wellness Guide is through Nourishing the Mother, because we've put the consciousness aspect to it as well, and comes with the PDF, so you can start to pick and choose what you want to do for winter with your family. And we love your comments. We love your emails and social media feeds. So please connect with us on Nourishing the Mother on Instagram and Facebook. And what else? Is that it?
Nourish the mother to rock the family, for sure.
And that's definitely none more true than when we're talking about the body being a temple. Regardless of how many children you've birthed and how many babies you are feeding, your body is a temple, and nothing works if your body is not working. So please put the presence back there, and if we can be of any assistance in that process, that's really what we want to do. That's where we came from, is nourish the mother, because we know when that happens, this whole family unit will work. But it can be hard allowing ourselves the permission and the resources in which to do that. And we hope that we're part of that conversation around permission.
Yeah.
So please give it to yourself permission to nourish. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavored to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.